morning. This is George with Happy Valley Outdoors, and I'm here with Courtney Davis, and we're at a vernal pond, State Game Lands 176, and she's doing a research project on the spotted salamander. So Courtney, why don't you explain what you're doing here?
Okay, so we've got about 12 ponds that we monitor, and what we do is essentially just deploy these traps, which are minnow traps, and we bait them with glow sticks, and that actually attracts animals. They're attracted to the light or the movement around the light. You can see, get this guy out, we've got a spotted salamander in here. So we're right at the end of breeding season right now, so our numbers are pretty low of what we're catching. On our busiest days we'll be getting about 1,200 of these guys. Let me get the leaf litter off of him. So this is a spotted salamander. This is a male. So typically with these guys, they'll be moving to the ponds right with the first spring rain, warm spring rain, ideally. The males will migrate first. You can see he's a little small. Wish we had a female to compare with him. The females will migrate with the second warm rain, and they'll only be in the ponds for about a week to 2 weeks. The females will lay their eggs, and then they'll be on their way out of the pond with the next rain.
It seems like he's enjoying the warmth of your hand. It's like, oh please, this is nice. Keep me here all day.
Yep, it's kind of chilly in the water, so he's actually pretty docile right now. Usually they're not as calm as this guy, but.
So the project you're working on, then, so you are trapping these salamanders, and you're counting them. You're also tagging them. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah. So this is a capture, mark, recapture project. And what that means is that we get individuals and we'll give them marks. So we actually inject them with a small piece of fluorescent plastic, and that allows us to sort of pick out animals that we've seen before. And then what's really cool about these guys is that their spot patterns are unique. So every individual has a different spot pattern, and we can use that to sort of track individual movement and survival.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So on a good day, you know, you said you're monitoring 12 ponds here?
Yep.
On a busy day, when they're really moving and migrating,
Yep.
how many individuals are you capturing?
So this year, on our busiest day, we had just under 1,200, and that's pretty typical for a busy day. On a slow day, we might get anywhere between 100 to 600 animals. Usually we have about 2 to 3 really busy days where we're catching right around 1,000 animals a day.
And the purpose of this research is to determine range, mortality?
So we're interested in a few different things. So we're looking to estimate how many there are in a pond, and within this network of 12 ponds, we're interested in looking at how often they come back to breed. So we think that males are pretty typical. They'll come back every year to breed, whereas females might skip a year. It's pretty energetically costly for them to breed. So females typically come every other year. We're interested in looking at movement between ponds. So is it likely that individuals sort of come back to the same pond to breed every year, or are they moving within a year to different ponds?
Now these, once they've bred, they go back then to their normal habitat, which is in the leaf litter?
Yep.
Is that
So
correct?
yeah, so these guys spend most of their life actually up in the upland terrestrial sort of matrix. It's pretty unusual for you to find them outside of the breeding season. Occasionally flipping a log here or there when it's really rainy, you'll find an adult, but usually you will only see these guys when they're in the ponds breeding.
And their diet is worms?
Really anything that they can get their head around. Yep. Typically insects, invertebrates, that sort of thing. The larval stage of this guy are carnivorous, so they'll eat lots of things, anything they can really get their mouth around, including each other.
Yes. Huh. And what is the lifespan of something like this?
So an adult can live upwards of 20 years. So usually in the wild, anywhere between 20 and 25 years. The interesting part of their life cycle is actually when they're in the pond in the larval stage. They look like little tadpoles, and we'll be having...
There he's,
he's
warming up.
So they lay thousands of eggs, and only about 2% of them will actually metamorphose into an adult.
All right. Well, if you look, this is pretty typical of the vernal ponds. And when we talk about vernal ponds, we're talking about a pond that periodically may go dry.
Yep.
So there are no predators, correct?
Correct. Yeah, so that's pretty vital for a lot of species that we have breeding in Pennsylvania. So the spotted salamander and the wood frog are obligate vernal pool breeders. So their larvae do a lot better if they're in an environment that doesn't have aquatic predators like fish in particular.
Right. Pretty cool. So what Courtney's going to do now, she's going to pull one of the egg masses out.
Or a bunch. So these are spotted salamander egg masses. And typically they'll lay on vegetation, so you can see that a bunch of spotted salamanders have laid on this broken twig. Kind of hard to get off the twig, but we'll manage. And this entire egg mass will come out of one female. They typically lay in clusters. So
Now, does it expand, or is
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So it essentially absorbs the water. That's what makes the.
Yeah, exactly. Usually the females, when you see one, they're pretty chunky. But these egg masses do expand once they reach the water. So this is actually also a spotted salamander egg mass.
Okay.
So it varies between populations, but about 70% of our spotted salamanders here will produce a protein that actually turns their egg masses white, and 30% will actually produce these clear egg masses. Alright, so this is our marking scheme, so you can see it's got a red right here, and then a Y back here. So we mark with red, yellow, and orange, and it's essentially just a little piece of plastic that fluoresces under UV light. And most animals are marked twice, and this mark means that we caught this animal in this pond earlier this year.
Now, there are some that have a natural fluorescence?
Yep, yeah, there are, and usually it's right along their abdomen. This guy doesn't have any. Usually right along their digestive tract, you'll see some natural fluorescence, and it looks like a yellow almost. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's neat.
Yeah.
So Courtney and I are sort of wrapping up our discussion about the vernal ponds and the salamanders, and the question I want to know is, so how do you end up in this type of work? You know, what interests you, and how did you end up, doing your PhD in this type of work?
So it's kind of a long story, but actually it started in college when I was doing my undergrad, and I took a class that sort of uses calculus, and we were doing a bunch of derivatives and trying to figure out like how this applied. And we had one really great example, and it was actually a frog example. And we were looking at modeling, population movement, and using sort of all of these skills that I didn't really have a purpose for before. And I got really excited by that. Like, hey, this is why I've been learning this stuff. And so I started my master's sort of following that excitement, trying to figure out if that's what I wanted to do, and turns out I did. So then I stayed at Penn State for my PhD as well. And this is one of my projects of my dissertation research. And what's really exciting about this is that for a lot of these species, we don't really know a whole lot about them.
And that, to me, is amazing, that we have something it's literally in our backyard, and we know virtually nothing about how it migrates or what it does half the year. You don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, before I started this project, I didn't even know that this sort of amphibian migration was a thing. So I grew up in upstate New York, where we have tons of these sort of vernal ponds, but I'd never experienced it. And I came here in my first year. My advisor was like, hey, let's start a project on spotted salamanders. And we came out and saw the migration, and it's literally hundreds of animals moving at once, and it's really incredible.
Yeah, it is. That's really cool. So thanks for all your help today.
Thank you.
And nice to meet you.
Thanks, you too. As I'm warming up.
So we're about froze. Everyone is chilly today, but it's a great day out at the ponds, and look for more. Happy Valley Outdoors.